Let's talk common sense.
I like how that's a special guest on my own channel of me being the special guest.
You're your own special guest.
I
Guest.
am, and
You're
everybody.
extra special.
Okay,
That's
yeah,
right.
we got to be careful, guys, because many people refer that to calling somebody a, and that's what people have been calling me lately. So let's be careful, careful, careful. My man, Mr. Unfiltered Lucky, is back in the house with Miss Jennifer. So the two that everybody loves seeing in the house are here tonight, and I'm just gonna regulate like the guest referee should.
You're steering the ship.
I'm gonna do my very best. Just remember, I'm completely blind. I don't see anything. So if there is anything that happens that are outside the spectrum of the rules, I don't care because I can't see it. So good luck. Fight starts now. Oh, that's right. We're talking true crime. My man, Unfiltered Lucky, how you been, my friend?
I've been good, man. Busy, real busy as always, trying to stay out of this heat. I know that it's very hot where you're at as well. How are you guys doing?
We're surviving.
Well, let the wife,
Barely.
yeah, let the wife tell me how I'm doing because I'm not sure, but I'm sure she'll let us all know how I'm doing.
I don't know. How are you doing?
Well, it's exciting to be somewhat back. Lucky, like in some of the conversations I've had with you, it's been kind of an up and down rocky battle where I've had some confidence issues, and it just feels good to be here with a good group of people within our chat and our crowd, but also with you, Lucky. And, it's always fun to sit down with friends and just have a good conversation and have some fun and include the family, the wife, and the dogs in that as well.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I took a little break myself. So I've taken a little bit of time from making some videos. I've been doing some research about some other cases. I've really been getting into this Johnny Cashman case. And so I've just been doing some more research. I have some new videos coming out. They're already made. I just need to upload them. But
Yeah, that's
yeah.
what we were laughing about there for a minute. Lucky, do you want to tell everybody that these have already been recorded, ladies and gentlemen? They've been worked on, and he just has not uploaded his work.
They're in the can. They're in the can.
Uh,
And one of them might not even be current. So but the one I made today is definitely current, and it's going to be a good video.
that's awesome. And now, you reminded me of the name of the case that you were working on because we had discussed that, and I told you I wanted to get in depth and look into it as well. And
Yes.
then I had forgotten the total name of the case and everything of that nature. So it's been interesting. Let me tell you, I've kind of been sitting behind the scenes. I've been listening, Lucky. I've been listening a lot to what other creators have been talking about, the work that they've been putting out there. I know you do the same because we talk about it.
He
Not
doesn't
a
listen to me, just other creators.
Well, you don't so
I'm just
much
teasing.
talk Idaho 4 unless it's you and I talking, and then of course the husband never listens to his wife when she talks. So how am I going to listen to?
I
Oh
do
my
watch
god.
your videos though, Jen.
You watch my little videos?
I do. I watch the dogs. I watch the Pitty's Gone Stripping.
Yep, the
Well,
crazy little kid.
well, it's a good break to get away from the stressfulness, and that's one thing I was going to say, Lucky. When I dive in and I just allow myself to lay back, close my eyes, and listen to what others are putting out there, whether it be the new documents, whether it be talking about the mainstream media's influence on the Idaho 4 case and Brian Koberger's chances of getting a fair trial. But then you kind of just go into the different theories and thoughts that other people portray. Let me tell you, you could get just intertwined into a complete web of confusion in a heartbeat because you're trying to pick and choose, in your mind what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. At the end of the day, I think you and I, we've been in a pretty good agreement that nothing makes sense when you try to fit it all together. So,
Right. Right. I mean, I think that I think you could look at it from both sides, and I think that you could find problems on both sides. So I think that I just saw Brian Wirch. He asked, does this channel lean towards the innocent or the guilt of Koberger? And really, we're all open-minded here and willing to listen to any evidence or any opinions, any insight that people have. So this isn't a channel that's just specifically for whether Brian Koberger's guilty or not. We like to talk about everything.
and I think I want to, first of all, I'm very proud that Lucky is now doing lives, and I'm glad that he is also broadcasting this over on his channel, so we have a lot of his subscribers here in the house tonight. I want to say thank you for joining us. This is my wife, Jennifer. I'm A.R. Hayes. I run the channel of Convict's Thoughts, and just for those that may not know us as well as some of our followers, we are not here to determine guilt or innocence when we speak about this case, because I think that's up to the jury. And we don't have all of the evidence that has been laid out before us to make that determination.
Right.
A lot of things that I speak upon, and I know Lucky kind of gears towards this too, is we put a focus on what's happening within the courts, within the documents, what's being talked about out amongst other people, and we try to project it in a way that's right down the center line, because at this very point, we know Brian Koberger has had those cuffs put on his wrist. He's been arrested. He's been detained now for almost 3 years as they brought charges for the homicides against him. There is evidence that just makes you really look at it and say, they potentially have the exact right person that committed this crime. Or you also can look on the other side and you can see the shakiness within the prosecution from wanting to even disclose all the information or showcase the evidence that they potentially have or how they got it. So this is a wide open, Lucky. This is a wide open discussion in regards to innocence or guilt. I personally have never chosen whether to agree with complete innocence, and I've never chosen to agree with guilt. I just, in my mind, I'm interested in getting to trial and seeing what's real and what's not, and then we can weigh it all out at that point. So
I agree. And I think it's important that people understand that this is how we are behind the scenes. We're not just like this because we're on a live. When AR and I are talking about the Idaho 4 case, we're talking about both sides. We're talking about all of the information. This isn't just for the live. This is how we are behind the scenes, very open-minded, and very willing to listen to insight and people's opinions and ideas because, who knows?
Yeah.
well, that's the thing, too. I think we realized through the years of watching cases, and Lucky, you've said it many times, one of your favorite things to do is just actually discuss true crime cases. Open-mindedly dive in, discuss what the facts are, what the theories are, and how they all play in to what makes these such interesting cases. And through the years, we've watched cases like the Bundys and all these various cases that happened before us, and they grab us because they're so interesting.
Right.
But I mean, many of those cases when I was younger, I didn't get to follow through the arrest and through the court process and watch it from day one all the way through. We watch documentaries after they've been solved down the road, and we're still finding interest in that. And I think what's so cool, Lucky, is in a case like this, we've dove in from day one and we've watched this mature, and we're not even at trial yet. We're not even literally at trial yet, and we're going to be able to see how all that plays out and just how interesting the facts of this case are demonstrated for everybody. And I think that, and that's going to lead into one of our main conversations tonight. We're going to talk about Dateline. We're going to talk about the leaks that have been put out there, whether they come from various people or one distinct entity. Maybe it's the FBI. Maybe it's families. Who knows? And this is what's so interesting. That's why I love having you on with us, Lucky, is the conversation is always real. It's fun. It's interesting, but it's open-minded. We're not here to discuss this case as a conspiracy. We're not here to point fingers at people that could potentially committed this crime by naming them by name, because we don't know. But we'll discuss what we do know and what we feel upon that.
Absolutely.
So before you get into your topics, do you think that the trial is going to get pushed back, or do you think it's going to be on the date they have set right now?
I think that AR was right. I think AR has been saying from the very beginning that this trial is going to get pushed back. And at this point, I would agree.
And I'm kind of debatable at this point. I know you and I have had this conversation. I, of course, shook my pom-pom like, hey, look at me. I was right from the beginning. There's no way this trial is going to go, when many people were talking about originally happening in Latah County. And if you remember, I shook my finger, Lucky, and I said, no. We're just at the beginning of this process. We're still going to go, through the change of venue. There's so much more to happen here. And now we sit, and August 11th is the deemed day that this is supposed to happen. And we know there's been a request for a continuance already filed, already motioned by Koberger and his defense team. And at first, I was very strong in the idea, well, this falls right into the fact that it is going to get pushed back. This is going to go back at minimum 6 months to a year. It could potentially go back farther than that. Right now, I'm almost sitting here thinking, we haven't heard anything from Hitler. Hitler is not coming out quickly with these decisions. And to me, that makes me think he's going to bulldoze through this and get this in front of a jury as quick as he can. But I think we also need to wait for that June 18th big hearing in regards to the alternative perps and other discussions. And I see Jen's getting cut out of the picture here. How do I need to get you in this picture?
It's because you turned on the camera to follow you, because when you go like this, it follows you.
So, Lucky, here, let's laugh about this real quick. She says, I turned on
because
the
when
camera.
he goes like this, it makes the camera follow you.
But
and
what she doesn't,
making it follow him.
What she doesn't understand is I don't turn anything on. I don't touch anything.
You didn't. You just went like this.
Oh, I turned it on by waving at it.
Yes.
I get it. Do we not call me I am the most amazing thing in the world? So, I could turn the webcam on.
Don't move your hands
just
so
by
much.
See how it works so well right here, Lucky?
I agree with you, Brian. I do agree with you. I hope the trial starts on August the 11th also. I agree. It's been some time. Do I think it will? I don't know. But I hope it does. I'm ready for this trial. I'm ready to go to trial. And of course, we want it to be a fair trial for the defendant, Brian Koberger. So, we'll see what happens in the next month or so. But I agree with you, Brian. I would love to see the trial happen in August.
And Lucky, let me throw something into your court real quick. I'm going to throw it into both you and Jennifer. And I'm just going to throw a concept out there for both of you and then let you two discuss it. I say the only way right now to move forward and set this as an open, fair trial for Brian Koberger, and this is just my feeling, and remember, this comes from someone that sat at that defense table in that defendant's chair trying to defend himself in cases and trials.
Right.
You got to get rid of this gag order at this point.
Agreed.
You got to open up the books, and you got to let the evidence come out in full, open matter. And I know people are going to come at me and say it's all, going to be an issue with the jury being, if that hasn't already happened, if the jury's not already been tainted, Open
Right.
up the floodgates, let the evidence come out, stop sealing everything going through the courts right now. Because remember, Lucky, and I'll preface throwing this to you guys with this. Judge Hippler was the very first judge in this case that stated he wanted to see the sealing of documents and information coming through the court stopped. Stop sealing it, start redacting, get the stuff flowing, and let's go. And that's not happened. That has not happened. And I'd love to know your thoughts, but I just say open the floodgates, man. Let the evidence come out, and let's get this stuff moving forward.
I agree. I agree. I think that one of the things I think about Judge Hippler has a big decision, because I think that it's not only, I think that a lot of it has to do with the image and, you know, what it's going to look like if he basically disregards what happened on the Dateline special. Now, you know, it's obviously pretty serious. I mean, he seemed pretty serious about it. So I think it's going to be the public image and how that's going to look. Are people going to feel as though Brian Kohberger cannot get a fair trial? You know, that's the thing.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of tough too. Like, I feel like they even have to push everything back because Ann Taylor's not even ready.
Well, and that's another debate because Ann Taylor did come out in the last hearing. We were there. We witnessed her saying that 10 paralegals added to her team could not get them ready for the trial.
Right.
So that kind of shook me a little bit. I had some negative thinking in regards to the defense tactics at that point. And I got what the judge was saying. Well, why did you take on another high-profile death penalty case on top of this one when you already knew you were falling behind on this? But then I want to give him some leeway and some credit in the fact that she's obviously investigating something outside of Brian Kohberger. She's investigating a different angle. She's looking at an alternative perp angle. We don't know what that is yet. I know there's been a lot of theorizing on that. There's been a lot of discussion of where that's going to go. We don't know yet. We don't even know legitimately what her evidence she turned in is.
Right.
It does seem confirmed, and I'll state this through everything I've listened to, and I've listened to a lot, guys. I know I can't read and do a lot of things, but I've listened to a lot that's out there. Ann Taylor did file through the courts the information that Hippler requested from her to be able to pursue his decision on whether to allow it or not. So she did get that in. She got in on time, and it has been filed. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to see. June 18th, that comes up. But, you know, at the end of the day, where are we right now in the preparation process by the defense? Will they be ready? Will the judge open his mind to the fact that the reason why they're not ready is because of how overwhelming the information of this case is? Or is he going to look at him and just say, well, it's because you're screwing around too much? And he's going to hold him accountable to the timeline. Very interesting concept.
Well, and this is something that I think about a lot, and that is how solid, you know, how strong really is the prosecution's case? I mean, I feel as though this Dateline special was basically an attack on Brian Kohberger's character. So to me, I feel as though, you know, on this Dateline special, you didn't hear anything that was favorable at all to Brian Kohberger. It was basically 100% against Brian Kohberger, basically pushing the narrative that he's already guilty before he even goes to trial. And to me, I feel like, you know, having Steve Gonsalves do all these series of interviews leading up to this Dateline special, and then this Dateline special comes out and leaks a bunch of information, you know, it makes me wonder really how solid this case is for the prosecution if they have to use these types of tactics. I mean, if they can't stand on their own evidence, then, you know, and they have to try to make Brian Kohberger look bad, attack his character in the media before the trial, you know, what does that say about the strength of their case?
It's one of the very first cases, and like I said, I think you and I and many others in here have watched other cases before and after the fact, and you don't see documentaries coming out prior to trial. You don't see books coming out prior to trial that are showcasing this is the person that actually committed the crime. Like, we do get news briefs, we do get different shows that talk about potential, they talk about the victims, they talk about potential suspects, reasonings for the crime, but they never zero in and focus on someone like they've done with Brian Koberger and said, this is the committer of the crime. This is the one. He's guilty.
I think that's what's so crazy about this case too, is like there has been books and shows coming out stating 100% he's the one that did it before he's even been convicted yet. So I think that's why a lot of people get upset about this case, is because we haven't received all the information yet. He hasn't been convicted yet. We don't know 100% he's the guy, because there is still stuff sealed that we don't know yet. So how can we already basically slander his name before he's had a fair trial, before we know for sure? I mean, obviously, if he's the one that did it, we want him to pay the price for it. But if he's not, this is crazy that he would have this mark on his name, with shows about him, with books about him, and then if it comes out that he wasn't the one that did it, that's crazy.
Right. I mean, I feel like we're kind of being sold the idea that he's guilty, basically, is what it feels like. It feels like somebody who doesn't have 100% confidence in their product, who's trying to oversell it. And to me, if they're trying to oversell it, it means that they're not that confident. That's just how I feel about it. When I see Steve Gonsalves do a series of interviews talking about, we got this guy, and if you don't think that he's guilty, then you're crazy. But to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because I feel like I said, I feel like Steve Gonsalves is selling the idea that he's guilty, and he's trying to sell this product to us. And, to me, it kind of says that he doesn't really have a whole lot of confidence in this prosecution.
Yeah.
But this isn't new.
No.
That's what's so crazy about this. I feel like the minute that officers stepped in front of the cameras for the very first time and began releasing, it was always a narrative that was being released that fit their gamut of trying to present this case, and it's followed suit all the way through. And that's why the Dateline show, which, I've gone back, I've watched it again, and then I've watched bits and pieces of it again, and nothing in that entirety of that show hit home to me as anything different than what we've been presented by the mainstream media and by the vocalization of the families of the victims and things of that nature. Nothing hit home that made me feel any differently on innocence or guilt. All I felt was, here comes a campaign that's literally to tarnish someone's name. Like, that's the way I see that. This leaked so-called evidence, to me, nothing hit home strongly about that made me think, yep, I gotta just start believing guilt. I gotta just start believing it now. But what did hit home with me is, well, you sure tarnished this guy's image and name for the entirety of his life. So if a jury finds him not guilty, if a jury finds this man not guilty, he's forever guilty. No matter what.
Oh, his life is never going to be the same. Yeah, his life will never be the same.
Well, it's always going to be the kid that got off with a quadruple homicide because the prosecution didn't present the case well enough at trial to get the conviction, or the jury just didn't take in all of the circumstantial evidence and piece it all together like so many have. It's just always going to be a reasoning within somebody if this young man, I call him young man, Lucky, because he's younger than us by years. He's younger than us.
A lot of years.
Yeah, so I'm going to call him young man. But, and that's a scary thing to think about when before people are legitimately even at trial, we as a society are allowing the targeting effect to showcase guilt before it's actually even perceived by a jury with the evidence of the case. And I know there was nothing in that Dateline special, Lucky, and maybe you'll disagree with me, maybe Jen will disagree with me. Nothing presented in that Dateline special outside of maybe the video of the car. Nothing that's even going to be demonstrated at trial.
No, it was all circumstantial. You know, that's the thing. It's all circumstantial. We knew, we had already seen, we hadn't seen the actual video of the car, but we knew that it was a thing already. So basically we just got to see it with our own eyes. But we already knew that that car was driving around that area, and we already knew that it couldn't be positively identified. I mean, if they could have positively identified it, they would have done that 2.5 years ago. You know, if they had a license plate or a picture of Brian Koberger driving this car, then, you know, we wouldn't still be contemplating if it was even a Hyundai Elantra 2.5 years down the road.
Yeah, and that's where I sit and I listen to a lot of people discuss that video, and I get where a lot of the conversation has gone now, where they're talking about different colors and all that, but I'm just talking specifically about the people that are talking about that being Brian Koberger's car driving on that camera into that neighborhood at that specific time. I need people to pause for a minute and say, okay, that potentially does look like a Hyundai Elantra. It looks like a white one. But they also need to take a deep breath and realize the FBI did not use that footage at all to be able to determine the car that they're determining was involved in this crime. They could not identify the car out of that footage. And I think people need to take a deep breath and realize that.
I agree.
So we have a question here from WB. Do y'all think we're gradually catching on to what really happened there, or getting hints?
What happened at the King Roadhouse?
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel? Do you feel like now we're starting to learn more and more coming out that leads you to believe that we know what's happened in this crime at that crime scene? Or do you think we're still pretty far off from knowing
No,
where we're at?
I think the more we know, the more confusing it becomes. I mean, after they released this 911 call, I was totally confused at that point because it sounded like two different situations going on. You know, I didn't, you know, when they released the text messages between Dylan and Bethany and their correspondence and stuff like that, that makes things more confusing, in my opinion. I mean, at least for me.
Yeah.
I tried to stay open-minded. And a part of being open-minded is you're never going to fully think in your mind that you've solved it all or you got all the answers. You just start to try to make common sense with the bits and the pieces that we do feel is creditable and where we stand. And at the end of the day, like you said, right now, the common sense factors, there are a few. There are a few on both sides of this, Lucky,
Absolutely.
that I could look at, and I could say within a common reasoning, I could figure this played into this. And then the common reason of this, I could figure how that discounts that. But my whole issue that I have, and it goes all the way back to the very beginning, Lucky, and I think this is where a lot of people still have the common sense issue with what has been portrayed to us, is it's come out in bits and pieces, and every time something new comes out, it shows that something prior to that was dishonest or not correct. And I think that all even focuses back onto the very arrest warrant, the PCA, where it's clearly stated by so many, even the people that have found Brian Koberger guilty, that that's not correct information. Just some wave it off like it doesn't matter that it's not correct information. Where someone like myself, and I even know you've done it too, we look at it and go, well, how the heck did you even get the arrest if the arrest warrant's not right?
Oh, I agree.
So yeah, the entanglement of confusion, that's going to last forever in this case. Even long after a decision is made by a jury, this case is going to be talked about for the next 20 years.
Oh yeah,
maybe 25
for sure. I mean, we're still talking about the Casey Anthony case, you know, and that's what, 20 years old now.
Chris Watts,
Yeah.
OJ.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I want to say thank you, Connie, for giving Lucky the super chat. She said, rest in peace, Xana, Ethan, Bethany, or sorry, Kaylee and Maddie. I have listened for 2 years now. Dateline could get the case thrown out. In my opinion, it was probably leaked by prosecution because that's a better look for them since they have no evidence.
So let's jump into that real quick because, first of all, again, thank you very much for the kindness shown towards Lucky and his channel.
It's Tennessee Connie. So thank you, Tennessee Connie.
Jen sometimes gets rushing through. She's so excited to ask the question.
Well, no, I was confused about how to pronounce it at first too, but she clarified it. So that I was reading it in the chat.
Well, the great thing is both of you could actually see it. So if you could imagine what I would have done to that when I tried to. But I think that's a good segue based upon what she had to say into what do you think, Lucky? And I'm not even going to jump into the leaking source to begin with, because we know Dateline they have connections. They've been around forever. They have leaks, and they've got informants and people that give them all kinds of information. It's going to be a wide open ballgame. I mean, I think in our discussions, you and I both feel it's absolutely ridiculous for anybody to think the defense or anybody trying to defend Bryan Kohberger would have been the leaks of this information, because by no means does this make him look any more innocent or any better as a person by these leaks coming out. But do you feel in your mind, in your feelings, that there should be some sort of disciplining that happens by Judge Hippler to go against what Dateline has done, to regulate that? Do you think there's a fair punishment there?
I don't know what the punishment would be. I don't know what a fair punishment would be, but I think they definitely need to be held accountable. I mean, it's a very slippery slope when you're leaking information from within the investigation. Because to me, that tells me that someone within this investigation, if it was someone within the investigation, it tells me that they're trying to sabotage this defendant. And to me, that's not a fair trial. You know, when basically they're leaking information that Judge Hippler called it sensitive information to the case, then to me, they're trying to sabotage that defendant. And that means that he's not getting a fair trial. So for me, like I said, I'm open to all information. He could be guilty. He could be innocent. But if he's not getting a fair trial, that's a problem.
But at the end of the day, you also have to ask yourself, if Judge Hippler decides to discipline, let's just say, we'll utilize the prosecution. We'll say, okay, Judge Hippler is determined, the prosecution has leaked some of this information out there. There's only a handful of ways that disciplining the prosecution could literally happen. And a lot of those ways do not benefit Bryan Kohberger in any way. And let me explain to you why I feel that way, Lucky. And then I would love for the two of you to jump in on my errors of the way I feel. But, okay, so a discipline could be, one, many people are shooting for, let's take the death penalty off the table. Let's remove that death penalty off the table. And I get, okay, I'm going to preface this by saying, I get and I understand the one difference that does make that could potentially help Bryan Kohberger is the fact you've now removed the death penalty qualified jury from the mix, and you've lessened that burden for a normal, everyday criminal felony jury. So the presentation for the defense is much easier. They don't have to go through all the process of the mitigation and all the different processes they have to go through. So I get it, release some of the burden. But guess what? It doesn't take away the fact this information and this supposed evidence against Brian Koberger is still there. So I get we're no longer facing the death penalty, but guess what? At the end of the day, that doesn't benefit Brian Koberger. Now, instead of death penalty, he's facing 4 times life sentences without the possibility of parole.
Right.
I've been locked up, man. I've done time. If you're going to give me life without the possibility of parole, when I had the potential option at the death penalty, I'll take the death penalty, please.
Right.
I'll take that now. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sitting in there for 65 years.
Right.
Like, this isn't happening.
And he's young, he's young. But I'm also kind of that opinion that if he is guilty, then he should get the harshest punishment possible. And so, there's also that. But I agree with you. I think I would choose the death penalty as well.
I'm just laying it out there as, if this is a punishment by Judge Hippler for the leaking situation, I don't think it benefits Brian Koberger as much as what people think to get that death penalty off the table. Because either way, if we sit where we sit today, if the prosecution has the case, if they have the evidence to prosecute Brian Koberger, I'm telling you right now, man, like, I get the differences of the juries. I get it. If they've got him and they got the evidence, it doesn't matter what jury it is. He's going to get convicted.
Well, I mean, with or without the death penalty, if he gets life, I mean, that's pretty much like the death penalty too. That's just they don't actually go in and, put him down. It's you're going to be in prison for the rest of your natural life either way, because you're going to get 4 life sentences if you don't get the death penalty.
Well, also within this situation, like, you've seen what happens in revolving around within a penitentiary walls. Brian Koberger isn't the type of individual that's going to walk a prison yard with his head held high and be able to handle himself. No. I hate to say that. He's just not.
I'm going to agree. I'm going to agree with you. Hey, thank you. Thank you, A Curious Rose. I appreciate it.
With the odd character and the odd behavior, and if some of this information is really true about types of things he was searching and that gets relayed out onto a yard, there's trouble to be had. But I think he'll be on a medical yard anyway with the spectrum and all that. But you don't just walk every day in the penitentiary without looking over your shoulder knowing somebody's coming for you. And I don't care who you are. Anybody and everybody has somebody coming for them. And you just don't last life sentences unless you're just really on a protected situation type yard. But moving on, I mean, also in another, okay, so how else can they literally discipline this situation? Okay, well, we remove that evidence from the table. That evidence can no longer be presented at trial before the jury. I'm telling you right now, what they leaked through Dateline won't be presented at trial to the jury anyway.
Right. But we've already seen it.
I mean,
I agree with you. I agree with you. To me, I'm big on the whole, once it's out there, it's out there, no. And I think they know that. I think that Dateline knows that. I think that Dateline and the prosecution both expected this from Judge Hippler.
Question from Citrus. She said, sorry if she missed this. Did Hippler rule on something today?
if he has, I haven't got notification of it yet. I mean,
Me neither.
we'll look at the documents here in a minute and see. I don't know if he did. I know we've been waiting on him to obviously respond to some of the motions because we've got a few that are key in play, including, you know, his decision on whether he's going to continue this case down the road or what he's going to do. But and we'll definitely look into that. I mean, that's the thing. Like, what evidence can Hitler strike now that's going to make all that much of a difference?
Right.
If what we've seen through the motions in limine hearings, the motions to suppress hearings, the various documents that have come out with court official evidence, what of that are you going to strike at this point that's going to change the course of this to where, because you have to remember, it's got to be strong enough to make a big enough difference that Brian Koberger's either found not guilty. Oh, my hand is doing this.
It
zooming.
is. That's why I'm telling you to
Look at
stop
me. I
using your
have
hands.
magic powers, Lucky. Can you believe
Oh,
this?
I've been watching it. I've been watching it happen.
Yeah, he keeps doing it, and I don't.
You know what? Okay, I got to keep my hands down.
You have to.
I mean, this is. I can't believe we can't turn that off or something.
Well, I don't know how to do it in the middle of a live.
Well, everybody's zoomed in on me now. This is the most ugly, beautiful thing you've ever seen before in your life.
Do
but
this really quick so you can turn it off.
What am I doing now?
And
You
then-
just told
and
me.
then don't do it again.
I lost my train of thought, Lucky. Why don't you take over for a minute while I'm over here playing Wizard of Oz?
Is it? Are we dealing with AI over here? Is that what
I'm
this
doing
is?
the Harry Potter's.
We have a new webcam, and AR talks too much with his hands, and it has a hand gesture where you can obviously make it follow you and zoom in and zoom out, and I haven't figured out how to shut that off yet, and so now he's obviously getting it to follow him and zoom in on him.
I'm
You know,
guilty. I'm guilty of the same thing, AR. I talk with my hands. It helps me keep my rhythm. So
Well, I'm just so
I
used
talk
to
with my hands
sticking
a lot.
up. Middle fingers have to come out so much during my conversations that I'm not used to having a camera zoom directly in on my hands. But anyway, I'm gonna throw the torch to you. I mean, in your opinion, Lucky, this is a big decision for Judge Hitler. I mean, he assigned an investigative, judge into this, a prosecutor that was going to find the very part of this that needs to be found.
Right.
In my opinion, as I toss it to you, I think the reality of it is he just wants to stop the leaks. Like, he just wants. If you notice, Steve Gonsalves has been really quiet.
Yeah.
There has not been as much out and about interviews going on and national TV happening. So I think that people do understand there's a lot of focus on that right now. But at the end of the day, Brian Koberger does not want a dismissal or a mistrial. That is not beneficial to Brian Koberger.
Right.
In any way whatsoever. At this very point, Brian Koberger wants to go to trial, and he wants to get found not guilty. He wants his defense team to prove that he's not guilty, and I don't think there's anything Hitler can do, like you said, at this very point, through this investigation of this leak or punishment or anything, that's going to get Brian Koberger deemed not guilty at trial based upon this decision. I just don't see it.
I agree. Well, and we still have books coming out, so there'll probably be a few more specials. There'll probably be some more books that come out before trial hits. It just, it's just never really a smart thing to do to go against a judge's order, And I think that's what the prosecution did. If it was I believe it came from the prosecution side. I don't see any benefit to the defense leaking this information. I mean, if you're gambling that you're going to possibly get a continuance by making your client look horrible in the public eye, then I don't think that's a gamble that Ann Taylor would want to take. And I definitely don't think that it's a gamble that Brian Koberger would want to take. I mean, he don't want people seeing that internet search information and stuff like that. I don't think there's any way that the defense leaked this information.
I mean, I have had people, and I talked with Jen about it a little bit, that state, well, Brian Koberger and his defense team would do it to taint the jury and potentially make sure that they can't see the jury, which then leads to what? I mean, at that point, it's a mistrial. It's another bad step for Brian Koberger. So I just shake my head at people that say that. Now, look, is this all being done potentially to set up an appeal? Nothing needs to be done by Brian Koberger or his defense team to set up an appeal, because they're already awarded appeals on cases of this magnitude. A death penalty case has, oh my God, they got so many levels of appeals. It's unreal. And people, this is going to be on the doorstep of the Idaho Supreme Court immediately after a decision in the courtroom by a jury is implemented. If it's guilty, this will be in front of an appeals court in Idaho so fast, I mean, it's ridiculous. And it will be in front of a federal appeals court not long after that. So nobody needs to think that the defense themselves are trying to prepare for an appeal. They've got them. They've got them. Like, you don't need to do that. So I don't think this is just me, I don't think it came from the prosecution. I think these leaks came very early in this case by the FBI. I think the FBI released information back even when Annie Elise, 10 to life, had a conversation with her husband and some FBI agent that gave out it was misinformation, but it was correct in regards to it was the sheath, but they said it was under Ethan's body, so it was miscalculated in what they made the statement as. But that's who would have had Brian Koberger's phone. They would have had the downloads. They would have had all of that. And they're really the ones that hold themselves above the law. Like, you're not going to punish the FBI because the FBI is not going to furnish you the information you're asking for.
Right.
So I don't think Bill Thompson, Ashley Jennings, the prosecution, I don't think they would have had a reasoning to do this. But I'll tell you what, this came out very early on, and it was damn well done by law enforcement and the FBI very early. Very early.
Right. Well, I think I think a lot of this, we know that the camera footage from 1112 King Road, we know that the Gonzalez family had access to that from the very beginning. I mean, they already had that footage. That's what Olivia Gonzalez said that she used to verify that Kaylee and Maddie had returned home at 1:56. So they've had that footage from the very beginning.
What's very interesting, like, we see the leak of the white car driving on that camera. Why would we not have seen a leak of the car bringing Kaylee and Maddie home? Why are we not seeing that?
Right.
Because I guarantee you that's important footage. It's a time frame. Haven't seen it. And I obviously want your guys' opinion. Then I'll throw my 2 cents in as to why. But we also don't see the DoorDash. We don't see really any other footage being leaked that could potentially have been in the Gonzalez family hands outside the Brian Koberger car.
Yeah. Well, you know what we don't see is we don't see Brian Koberger's car returning to the scene at 9 a.m. in the broad daylight when they could have gotten a great view of his car, maybe him even driving his car. So where's that footage? Since they said that he returned to the crime scene, where's that camera footage? Because law enforcement hadn't even been called yet.
or any of the other 23 times he supposedly visited the crime scene prior to this crime.
Right.
Well, and on the topic of the car, Silva Fox said, "How can you be sure the car in the video was white when the pumpkins were white on the Porsche of 1122?" So, could the color and the camera be off? Don't know.
Look,
Because I've even heard people say that the car was blue. Did you hear that? Someone said it was a blue, not
green.
white. Well, I've heard a couple different colors, but
Well, and Lucky, I just want to make a quick statement. Like, I don't go against people's thoughts, their opinions, the work that they've put in through the content creation. I'm just going to make a very clear statement based upon where I sit or where I feel. I feel that's a white car. I'm sorry, I do. I feel like it's a white car. I do understand that the pumpkins in that camera show as white. We know they're not white. I get it. I just have the knowledge based upon my past of people that do this job for an absolute living, identifying cars in crimes via these cameras, and they've got years upon years upon years worth of experience, and they've got much more technology than I do or could ever think about. And let me tell you, these things are utilized in court cases every single day. Every day. I don't feel as though, and I'm just going to utilize a color, and I'm not discrediting anybody by saying this, so I'm going to use even a different color. I do not feel as though these experts would take what would be deemed a red car, potentially red, and miss it as a white car in this footage.
I agree.
Because they're going to utilize the other cameras that these vehicles are caught on and compare them to this video of this car that maybe shows it as a white car and it's not a white car. But they would be able to go to the other video and see it was a red car driving around and match it to this video by the features of the car. So that's just where I stand. And you may feel differently, Lucky. I feel as though the work was done and they see it as a white car driving the neighborhood. That's all I can say about it.
I'm going to agree with you. I want to address Lucy Morningstar first real quick. She's asking me about my throat tattoo, and my throat was tattooed Japanese tabori, so it was all done by hand, and it was extremely painful. It took a long time. It's basically like getting stabbed in the throat 3,000 times. But I want to talk about the pumpkins because there's been a lot. I know a lot of people have talked about the idea that the pumpkins are white, but the reason that they're white is because infrared night vision, infrared cameras basically are going to pick up white, gray, black, stuff like that. So these pumpkins that were on the railing of 1112 King Road were basically right in front of a porch light. And this camera is connected to this porch light. So basically, the reason these pumpkins look white is because they're overexposed. That's why the pumpkins look white. A car is not going to be overexposed unless it's being heavily lit up. And I have a hard time believing that those street lights were lighting up those cars so bright that they were being picked up as white. I mean, I agree with you, AR. I think it was a white car.
I just personally know from experience, first of all, that's not the camera that they use to identify the car as being Brian Koberger's car utilized in this crime. They've used other cameras to make that determination. This camera, they said they could not make an identification of the car off of it. So that gives me the perception that what they've done, Lucky, is they've scoured the various cameras of what they feel as though was the route being driven by their suspect, who they feel as though is their suspect. I'm not saying it's the right person. I'm not saying it's the right car. I'm not saying anything. I'm not even saying that was Brian Coburn. I just feel as though in their investigation, from what I've seen them do in the past, they don't rely on one. They go find others and they piece them together. They compare them and they make their determination to the best of their efforts. Now, they still have to step before a jury and explain all this and make it sound feasible that that is legitimately Brian Koberger's car. I don't know if they could do that. I don't know. But at the end of the day, numerous cars evidently came through that had to have been caught on some of those cameras, and they were able to rule them out for some reason. For some reason, they were able to say, that one doesn't match what we're looking for. This one here's not, a part of our investigation. I don't know. I just personally feel as though if you told me that they said the car was white and it was a very light silver car that was driving through, I could agree that that could have mishapped. Like, I could agree that there could be an error there. And that's what Ann Taylor brought out, in her questioning. She said silver or a gray car. Her discussion was not eliminating a red or a pink or a blue or a neon yellow, or she specifically brought up certain colors. And I just have a gut feeling, come on, man. I mean, if they had seen a bright, flashing car driving on other cameras, that would have been their suspect's car. They'd have been all over that because it would have been pinpointed. And they don't have that.
Well, I mean, and we've heard that there was a camera at 11:26 possibly, because the camera at 11:12 would not have been able to see Jack Ducour walk into his house from that angle. So there has to be a camera at 11:26, because Steve Gonsalves said the camera across the street basically watched Jack Ducour walk into his house that night.
Yeah, that's what's going to be interesting. And Lucky, you hit a nail on the head. Show me a daytime freaking video or picture or still of something. You said he drove back in to the neighborhood the next morning. You even gave a distinct time that you felt like he was there. Right. Show it to us. Where is that at? Because that would have been the one to leak. That would have been the one to leak, not the nighttime one. The other reason why you leaked that nighttime one is to set the table for your narration of a timeline.
Right.
You just want to set the timeline by releasing that video. But you and I and many others with so much common sense know you couldn't determine anybody by that video. So that's only timeline. That's only timeline. Show us one at 9:30 in the morning, like you said, that could potentially show Brian Koberger. But that one just happens to not be there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the camera footage to me, because we don't even know if it's the same car that they're piecing together in all of the footage. That's the hard part, is how do you know that's the same vehicle in all of the camera footage without any identifying marks, without a license plate number? It just doesn't make sense. And without the proper way to identify that car, then how do they know it's the same car? We know that there were cars driving around that night. You can see it in the Banfield footage. I mean, we know there were other cars driving around that night. This neighborhood was popping. There was a party going on. There was parties all around this area. So I know sometimes it's kind of easy to get locked in on just Brian Koberger's Hyundai. But that's just because we know about this whole crime. There was a ton of other cars driving around that area.
Let me ask you real quick too, because maybe you'll know better than me. On the still photos that were released of what's supposedly Brian Koberger's car driving through there, if you remember, I believe Steve G was the one that released the still photos without the car. It was just of the street. You know, we all got a glimpse of that camera just facing out, and that's when we all said, "Oh, look, they got to have something. They got to have something because look, we're looking at this." Was every car in those white?
Right.
I mean, I don't remember.
No, they were not
I
all
mean,
white.
I think you saw other colored vehicles, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. You didn't just see a sea of white cars all over this area, you know.
I mean, in a black and white camera, do you only see black and white? Like in those types of ring cameras? I see. I just don't know much about them.
Yeah. If it's not color, I mean, you know, if it's not color, that's all you're going to see. But I agree. You know, I do think that I mean, and it's very possible that they have more than two cameras. I mean, there had to be, you never know how many cameras could be in that area because you have Linda Lane, you have 1112, possibly 1126. We don't know that for sure. That was according to Steve Gonsalves. And there had to be other cameras in that area. They're just so common. And I would feel like in a college area like that, you'd have a lot of security cameras.
Well, let me add. So we know they've got the Linda Lane because we watched the car pull in, back up, turn around, drive off, right? So what's the difference between those cameras to where the car coming in potentially to the neighborhood on the 1112 King Road could have distorted a yellow car to a white car, but the one over on Linda Lane shows a white car? Why is nobody questioning whether that one's white or not? To me, the reason why I ask you that is if we see a car drive in on the 1112 King Road that looks white, and then not long after that on the Linda Lane Road, we see that same white come in, turn around, and leave, doesn't that kind of connect two white cars? I mean, to me, it kind of says this white car started at point A, went to point B, and then turned around and went back. What would have been the difference between those cameras to where one people feel like changes the color, but the other one doesn't?
Right. Right. I think that you know, I've never, and I've said this before in videos before, I've just never really put a lot of value in the car driving around the neighborhood. Like I said, if they had a license plate, then we're in business. If they have a picture of the driver, we're in business. But I'm sorry, a white four-door sedan, that's just, to me, that's not definitive enough. I mean, there's how many white or light colored four-door sedans were probably in that area? I mean, the undercover cops who were in that area at the time of the crimes were driving a light blue four-door sedan.
I'm right there with you. If you can't prove to me who's in that car, it doesn't lead to guilt to me, because all you've done is show me a car that drove around. That's all you've done. I need to know who went in the house and committed these crimes. I need to know who's in the house, not the car. The house. Right. And if you can't portray to me at somewhere, I would feel as though with that car being anywhere and everywhere like they claim it is, you got to have something with him getting in and out of that car, whether it even be at his own apartment complex. Something had to have caught him in that car somehow. And I think their best opportunity of that would have been at 9:30 in the morning the next morning when they claimed he came back to the crime scene. If you could claim he came back to the crime scene, show it to us.
Right.
And people will say, well, they're saving that for trial. Well, that would have been the one I would have leaked.
Yeah.
If I'm going to do a whole Dateline special on guilt of Brian Koberger, that would have been the one I leaked.
Right.
If I'm going to leak, I'm going to leak that one. Here you
Yeah,
go.
exactly.
Here's your proof.
Exactly. And you know, the thing is that, you know, I've talked to attorneys about this, and they've all said, even if he was driving around this neighborhood, that's still not proof that that he went to the house. It's not illegal to drive around a neighborhood.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that he did, but I'm saying even if he was driving around this neighborhood, that still doesn't put him at the crime scene. You know?
Mm-hmm.
I want to say real quick, because I know Jen's going to get over to some questions here too. I want to say, in one hand, we got a white car potentially driving around the neighborhood, right? So let's say that's circumstantial evidence that could be portrayed at trial of Brian Koberger potentially being in the neighborhood at the time of the crime. Okay, I kind of discount that on the other side and say, well, I think that should be nullified considering that white car and all of its testing after a quadruple homicide came back with zero evidence from the crime scene. No blood, no hairs, nothing from a quadruple hands-on stabbing crime scene. They negate each other. They're out. It actually looks better for Brian Koberger. That's my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
You did it again.
I moved it again. Look at me go with my Harry Potter skills.
Well, I don't think there's any way that there was no, like, they were saying how bloody and messy it was, but then they were saying we don't have any DNA. They contradict themselves a lot.
No, they didn't contradict themselves. The state came out. The initial reports were done during the investigation at the beginning. This is one of the most bloody crime scenes that's ever been seen by these people working. The defense came out and stated, hey, by the way, through all of your attempts tearing apart the arrested suspect's car that you claim is the one utilized to get to and from the crime scene and drive around it, had zero forensic evidence from the crime scene in it. So the prosecution didn't say that.
Oh.
Jen's going to make me do Houdini by, I don't know what's going on here. I'll just keep my hands down.
Just hold your hands down.
She took away my Harry Potter skills, Lucky. My Harry Potter skills.
You're going to be out of rhythm now.
Oh my goodness.
So Jen's going to hit some of these questions and...
All right.
All right. So this was one of the ones in the beginning from Michelle. So she said, I think it's interesting that Alan, as a Harvard lawyer, was on the, I think that meant to say OJ. She corrected that. Defense team stated that this case is not by any means a slam dunk case.
Oh, I think we all agree that this is going to be a battle within this court. There is no slam dunk in the Brian Koberger case at all. And I think the prosecution knows it. I think Judge Hippler knows it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have set aside as much time for this trial as they did. They set aside months for this trial. Months.
Yeah. I mean, I'll address the question too, because Paula Coco, one of my members, actually sent this to me with Alan Dershowitz, and he came out and he said this is not a slam dunk for the prosecution. They have all circumstantial evidence. He basically said it's another OJ. That's basically what he said, and we know that he was involved in that OJ situation. So, you know, he basically made it pretty clear that, you know, it's going to be an uphill battle for the prosecution.
I mean, just from the watching of people and reading the documents of people, you know, that I was incarcerated with, or people I've been around, you know, that have gone through trials, my gut feeling is Brian Koberger has a better shot of being found not guilty than guilty in this case at this point with what we know. I don't know what more they have because of the seedling. I don't know if if they bring out a witness that saw this, like more so than Dylan doesn't mean anything to me. But if they bring out a witness that saw Brian Koberger with the weapon, saw Brian Koberger disposing of bloody clothes, something,
Right.
that's going to be hard to overcome in a case like this for the defense team. It's
Right.
going to be very interesting, though, this alternative perp evidence, what's being turned in by Ann Taylor, that's going to be reviewed by Hippler and decisions can be made. I mean, this supposedly is naming someone.
Mm-hmm.
Naming someone.
I'm interested. I'm definitely interested. I'm curious, who this alternate perpetrator is going to be.
Well, at the end of the day, you've got to think to yourself, too, if Ann Taylor could go through this investigative mold and legitimately come to a name and provide evidence to Hippler that would allow for him to say, yeah, we're going to introduce this. This is important. Yeah. That kind of proves to me the prosecution doesn't have a solid case against Brian Koberger.
Right.
I mean, it's got to be more than reasonable doubt to convict Brian Koberger of this case. If Ann Taylor can prove there's potentially evidence of somebody else, and Hippler allows that name. I mean, this is a name. This isn't my client didn't do it based on these circumstances. This is, no, that person's did this.
Right.
That's reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the one thing people don't realize is the defense just has to prove reasonable doubt. They don't necessarily have to prove that he 100% didn't do it. They just have to prove reasonable doubt.
Right. All they have to do really is just refute the prosecution's evidence. The prosecution has to prove that he committed this crime. So yeah.
And that was going to be my next content, but I'm going to ask you right here, point blank, what my next content is, and I want to ask your opinion. Should Ann Taylor play by the book, or should she have played dirty and utilize the alternative perp evidence behind the scenes without disclosing this to the prosecution? What I'm saying is she could have done dirty just like Bill Thompson and them wanted to do, and not turned over this evidence, not turned this over to the prosecution for them to build their argument at trial against it. She could have withheld that and just utilized the knowledge she got from it in just debunking the prosecution's case. Do you play dirty or do you play by the rules if you're the defense?
I would hope that everybody would play by the rules. But I don't feel like the prosecution has played by the rules. And I mean, I feel as though, I don't know, man, that's kind of a situation, because I feel as though it should all be on the up and up, but I don't know. That's a really good question. It goes back to how I feel about Ann Taylor being from Idaho, being from, being a student of University of Idaho, knowing all these people that she's involved with. I've just always felt like if it was a defense team that was from outside of Idaho that didn't know any of these people, I think you would probably see maybe a few little dirty tactics in there.
But at the end of the day, it wouldn't be considered dirty because it's not her obligation to solve the crime. It's not her obligation to investigate other people that could potentially be involved. That's what makes me kind of shaky about it, Lucky, is when I think about it. Why are you going so up and above and doing all of this investigative work? Why aren't you just pushing that into the judge's hands for the judge to push the prosecution like, hey, you have to go look into this. She's literally filing this as if she wants to build the whole case at trial onto these alternative perps and turn the trial to them rather than her client, Brian Kohberger, that's sitting in that defendant's chair. And I'll tell you, me as a defendant, me sitting in that defendant's chair, all the punishment's on my shoulders. So if your argument doesn't work, that fails me. That's my life on the line. So I kind of want you to defend me and utilize every twist, every little crinkle. If you've got a potential to prove reasonable doubt, I want you to tuck that in your pocket and you fire that at trial. Don't let that out the bag now. She might have just ruined Brian Kohberger's alternative perp chance defense.
Well, and the crazy thing is, this all came from tips, from the tips that investigators were getting. So Ann Taylor and the defense team are going through these tips, and that's how they come across this alternate perpetrator. So it made me wonder, when Ann Taylor said that in court, it made me wonder why the prosecution didn't come up with that same tip. I wonder how many tips they got that were alternate perpetrators,
Ann Taylor made it pretty clear at the hearing we were at that the tip came into her and they started looking into it. The defense did. And it led them directly to the University of Idaho campus, utilizing cameras on campus. And she was in the works of connecting those cameras together. And I couldn't quite, I was really trying to piece together, what is she trying to say here? But she just threw the tidbit out there, and this was in regards to the alternative perp argument in the motion to eliminate that was filed by the prosecution. So this was the big one for me when we attended this trial. This is the one I wanted to hear. And she threw some nuggets out there. And I've never stopped thinking about those nuggets. But I shake my head, man, because I think this alternative perp, it's really enticing. It's really interesting. And I think that it's an exciting type of factor into this. But I think once Hippler rules upon it, it could be devastating either way he rules. If he rules that it's admitted, well, now why even go to trial for Brian Kohberger? Don't you have to relaunch the investigation? Because if he feels like it's potentially a good argument, they need to go investigate whoever that person is.
And you're probably going to need the feds to do that because they conducted this whole investigation. So you're probably going to have to get them to reinvestigate this new person because Moscow PD didn't do any of this investigation.
Right.
LC said there was said to be 45,000 tips. Were they all investigated by law enforcement? Probably not. That's a lot.
I've heard various different numbers of the amount of tips. We know it's a very large amount. We know they're still coming in today. They are still coming in today. And Ann Taylor said that she's only been able to go through a handful of them. She has not been able to get very deep into these things. And that's one thing I want to ask you, Lucky. First of all, how do you feel about Ann Taylor and the method that she's attacked this case to the point to where she's even said she hasn't been able to go through all the evidence. She hasn't even been able to go through the tips. Even if she had 10 paralegals on her team right now added, she would not be ready for trial.
I mean, it's a lot of information, and I feel like at some point, I mean, how does that sound? When the prosecution dumps, what did they dump on them? 50 some terabytes of information in the very beginning. And then later on, they said none of that even mattered.
Yeah.
So why did you dump all those terabytes of information on the defense?
Distraction.
Yeah, right.
Distract them.
Right. And that's the thing is I just feel as though, I feel like Ann Taylor, there might not ever be enough time. But like you've said before, he does deserve a fair trial, and he does deserve to be prepared to defend himself. And if there's still information trickling in, even now, as we speak, then how are they really supposed to get prepared in their defense if there's still information trickling in from the prosecution? I mean, do you remember in Latah County when Bill Thompson stood up there and he said, we've given them everything that we have, and they hadn't given them nothing?
Yeah.
I
remember it quite well, but I at the end of the day, I scratch my head, and the failure actually comes from the investigation itself. This case should have never led to an arrest in 4 to 6 weeks. This is the very type of case that takes years to investigate. That's why we see it take, for like the Long Island, serial killer, years upon years upon years upon years before they make an arrest. You didn't catch anybody red-handed in this case. You don't have direct evidence outside of a sheath with very minuscule amount of just disputable DNA on it that you backdoored an investigation of. There had to have been a better way of doing this investigation. It didn't seem so rushed. That could have been done in a way that by the time you go to trial, it's all laid out for the defense. Like, here's all the evidence that we're going to use. This is all you need,
Right.
The initial part of this was battling over the IGG in the courtroom. This was not a battle over real and true evidence that was going to be utilized at trial. This was a battle over policies and various... This could have all been rectified by... Take 6 months to investigate this. If you're so worried about Brian Koberger disappearing, well, you followed him across the country to begin with. I'm sure you could have followed him back to his college at WSU and just watched him in the classroom until you felt like you had enough to arrest him.
Right. And that's kind of the big problem that I have, is if you have the evidence that proves that Brian Koberger committed this crime, why not just present it? Why do you have to present 58 terabytes of BS? Why don't you just present the evidence, save us all some time, maybe save Idaho some money, and present the evidence that proves that Brian Koberger is guilty? It's ridiculous.
It's frustrating because it's the taxpayers' dollars paying for this.
Right.
It's taxpayers' money going out the window, and all we're seeing is sealed, sealed, sealed. If literally this case is so bad that it had to be sealed over the fact that Brian Koberger was autistic, and just some of the other... Why else is this case sealed? What are we sealing this case for? Why is it so locked up? Unlock it. What is the problem here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see it. That's the thing. That's what gets me, is that it's all this smoke and mirrors BS. And, and for me, like I said, I'm very open-minded. I'm down to look at everything, but I still haven't seen not one piece of evidence that says, okay, there it is. That's why we know that he's guilty. I haven't seen that yet. Everything they have is circumstantial. Everything they have is pixelated. Every bit of evidence that they have, you have to kind of tilt your head and look from the side of your eye in the best light. It's a bunch of BS. I think that they should just come out with the evidence that shows that he's guilty. Why not just cut through all the red tape and show the defense why they have Brian Koberger?
True.
I agree.
Official says, did Ann Taylor say they had over 500 witnesses and no one wanted to fess up?
So what she was talking about is she was going around to try to interview people. I'm sure you remember this as well, Lucky, when she was talking about 400 people that she wanted to interview in regards to this case, and many of them would not answer their doors, didn't have any comments for them, which to me kind of showcases that they were potentially on the prosecution side, and she wanted to do the secondary interviews with them, and they wouldn't do it.
Right. I remember that.
Jen's doing something here. I'm not sure what.
Look, has to take a break for a sec. So,
Right.
there was a question, I think, specifically for you. Says, where was that? It's probably at the top. Okay. So question for AR and Jen, and I remember this one because I totally got the vibe. Something really off about the cop that took Kaylee's driver's license. Something there. I felt like he was checking up on her. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is one of the things I think from very early on, even up until this day, and it's a great conversation. I'm glad you actually brought this up, because I've always had an issue with this in regards to the photographing of Kaylee's ID and the whole reasoning for the police to be at the door in that situation. And then I remember Dylan running away from the door, and that's why Kaylee and Hunter had to come out. That whole situation seemed off, but also the fact, you have to remember, the cops were there on a noise complaint that was not actually called in on the 1122 King Road home. He mentioned the reason why he stopped in, and he pointed out the speaker in the back door, stating that it could be a $300 fine, but they hadn't done anything wrong. So to take a photograph of an ID, and let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I've had more interaction with police officers than
you would like,
than I would ever wish to have had, and they don't take pictures of my ID. Ever have I had a picture of my ID taken.
I can't think of ever getting my picture of my ID. Like whenever I've had like a ticket or something or interaction, they've never taken a picture of it. So that's.
And I've had them show up at my house. I've had them show up at my work. I've had them pull me over in the car. I've had street. I've never had them take a picture of my ID. Now, people say they have some sort of system. I don't feel, if an officer took my ID and wanted to photograph it with a cell phone, it would not be happening.
Yeah, that was definitely really weird. And then there was one more question I saw here. AR, do you mean a witness that isn't DM when you were talking about witnesses?
Yeah, that's what I mean, I'm not saying, and Lucky, I'm sure you agree, we're not saying that there are other witnesses. We don't know. We
Right.
don't know. But it would not surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me either. You know, well, you already know, I still feel like there was somebody that possibly went to the hospital from that house that morning. I just don't know why. I don't know why Robin Nance would report that, and if that's not what she was told.
Well, I think back to the passed out in the front yard. Like, now I know people are saying, you know, when 911 was called and blah, 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 they're all saying now it was Xana in the house, potentially passed out. But man, I'll tell you what, it was flying around at the very beginning that the caller or one of the callers of 911 passed out in the front yard. And then, you know, like you said, I mean, we verified it with the very people that announced it on national TV about someone leaving the scene to go to the hospital. It was 4 deceased and 1 to the hospital. And something just hits me that there's something still funny about this, that there's potentially maybe a survivor, maybe a witness, maybe somebody that was transported to the hospital that later passed. So maybe it was 3 at the scene that lost their lives. I mean, could Xana potentially have been taken from the scene in an ambulance and lost her life at the hospital, but gave information prior? You never know. You never know.
Yeah, that's true. Or maybe another suspect. You know, maybe a suspect got injured.
Right.
There's a lot of things that could happen, and I think that, but to me, I feel like for Robin Nance to report that and then to double down on that and confirm that that is what she said, and that Moscow PD was scrubbing all of that information, to me, I mean, I feel as though there had to be some validity to it.
Yeah, it's just so crazy to even think about, because we see it even today. Pictures that we all know we've seen from back then, gone, removed, scrubbed. The house is down. There's so much that's just being buried in this case and hidden,
Right.
that this doesn't happen in normal cases. This does not happen in real crime. I mean, this is far different than anything I've ever seen or experienced. And I've been locked up with some pretty crazy people that did some pretty crazy stuff, and nothing like this.
Right.
Nothing.
Right. Well, and I think that it's, for me, I always like to look at the investigations. That's something that I like to dig into. That's something that sparks my interest when it comes to true crime, is how they conduct the investigation. And there's so many things about this investigation that just don't make any sense whatsoever. From the IGG to, digging Brian Koberger's dad's garbage out of the, his DNA out of the garbage after they already had his name. I mean, they already had Brian Koberger's name on December 19th from their IGG investigation. But then they went and dug in his garbage on the 27th and dug his dad's DNA out of the trash. And basically all that really proved was that it was Brian Koberger's dad. But they made it sound like that was the final piece that they needed to arrest Brian Koberger.
And all of that doesn't even, what makes even less sense to me is now you're not going to utilize any part of that investigative tactics or what happened within that investigation at trial. Now it's just been condensed down to a simple tip. Man, the hiding of things in this case is what really bothers me the most. You're not protecting Brian Koberger. This hiding and the gagging of all this information does not protect Brian Koberger. He's been attacked ruthlessly across the board, not only through mainstream media, through social media, but even within the own courtroom of watching a Judge Hippler, make the very clear statements. Well, if you hadn't left your DNA at the crime scene, which tells me, so you pretty much are clearly stating that Brian Koberger was at the crime scene and left his DNA there. We don't need to go to trial now, Judge Hippler, because you've already deemed that he left his DNA at the crime scene. You said it in national TV, national televised court by the very judge overseeing the case.
Yeah.
Just clearly told the defendant, you should not have left your DNA at the crime scene.
Right. And then he accused his expert of being a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
It's
These are not
crazy.
things that are normal within a courtroom view. I mean, this was done, Lucky, for all to see. That's the hardest part for me to, I guess, digest and really let sink in and be okay with, is everything on national TV is seen by millions of people. Millions. And when they say, well, no, it doesn't taint the jury pool, this doesn't have any effect, they're going to find plenty of people that didn't watch this stuff. Guess what? The majority of the people watching this stuff are from Idaho. It's
Right.
a local case. It's an Idaho case. I was in Idaho. Jen and I spent time there. We talked to people. You don't think we got the feel of who knew and who didn't? Now, when you said, hey, that quadruple homicide with Brian Koberger at the courthouse. No, Brian Koberger didn't ring a bell to some of the people. It didn't ring a bell to him. When you said that University of Idaho case where the 4 kids were taken on the University of Idaho, they all knew. And they would even turn around and say, oh, that Brian guy. It's
Right.
like millions of people are watching this. And unfortunately, you just had a judge taint his own courtroom, showing he's not impartial. He's not right down the middle. He's supposed to be one that guides the rules and makes decisions on arguments. He's not the one that's supposed to dictate innocent or guilt. And he just did. He
Right.
did it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think he's well, I think he set the tone from the very beginning. The first words out of his mouth were, let's not start this hearing on a lie,
Right.
and say that I'm happy to be here, basically. Maybe not in those exact words, but he made it very clear that he does not want to be there.
Let me ask, how would you feel, Lucky, if you're the defendant in a death penalty case and your very judge clearly states, I don't want this case and I don't want to be here, so let's just get on with this? I'm telling you, I'd be devastated as a defendant. I'd say I'm screwed. I'm
Right.
screwed. Even my judge doesn't want to be here. Like, I'm screwed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, well, and not only that, but when the judge starts talking about, your DNA was on the knife sheath at the crime scene, and stuff like that. I mean, there's so much that goes into that. And I saw a question kind of fly by earlier. And basically, the problem with this judge, in my opinion, is that he's very opinionated, I guess. But the problem is that it's like going back to like what I said, once it's out there, once he said it, then people have already heard it. It can't be taken back. And I think that when he's basically saying that, that this is solid DNA evidence, which a lot of us, I think, would agree that it's circumstantial, then I think that's a problem when he does that in front of everybody in the court.
I agree.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was kind of crazy how he was like, well, we'll just tell the jury just to ignore that or to forget about that. It's like, once they heard it, how are they going to forget that?
Yeah, that was one of the arguments in the courtroom, and the judge just kind of looked at both sides and says, we'll just go ahead and we'll announce it to the jury to not think about that. And Taylor and Massa looked at each other and said, yeah, but they would have already heard it. Like, what do you mean don't hear what you already heard? Please
Unhear that.
Yeah, just
delete.
unhear that. That didn't matter.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, and that's the question I was thinking about was, basically a lot of people who are following this case are not getting into it as deep as we have, obviously. Everybody in this chat and stuff, we've all done a lot of research and we've all, really, really followed this case very closely. So we know that a lot of this evidence is circumstantial. But then when you have the mainstream media out there presenting it as this is what happened, then there's a lot of people who are following this case through the mainstream media. So of course they're going to think that Brian Kohberger is guilty because they haven't gotten any deeper into the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a big difference when you're watching mainstream media that reflects to multi-millions of people compared to what you're seeing. Let's just utilize the YouTube streets here. The people that are discussing possible innocence or innocent until proven guilty channels may have 30,000, 40,000 subscribers getting 20,000 views a video. That's a far-fetched difference between 3 million views of a Nancy Grace or a Banfield or somebody on News Nation compared to, my voice that carries to 5,000 people on a video isn't going to change any of those people's minds because they're not going to see me. It's just we need the power of the bigger voices to step up to the plate and preach what our country is about. That's innocent until proven guilty. That's evidence is what has to be utilized to prove your guilt, not just word of mouth or just narratives or discussions. Nobody should go to the penitentiary or lose their life to a death penalty based upon the way that we think or what we have to say. It needs to be proven. It needs to be shown. And I think right now it's a complete disadvantage for people like Brian. I mean, look at what happened in the Delphi case. And I know you and I have talked about this one, that, you know, we were not as up to the discussion on that case. But it went completely dark, man. It went completely, where the courtroom was literally dark. They allowed like 14 people into the courtroom on various, and if people don't think that's going to happen in Idaho with the Brian Kober, I'm sad to tell you, Hitler, with this newest decision based upon the leaks and these things happening, there's a good chance he shuts all this down to the public view.
Yeah.
That's really the only way he could rectify the wrongs that are happening, is the punishment's got to go out to the masses, not just the courtroom. It needs to go to the masses. It needs to go to, if you guys want to act like this and care so much about this leaked footage, I'm just going to shut down anything and everything in regards to this case, and you'll get nothing. You'll see nothing until it's said and done.
Am I getting feedback from my microphone? I don't have any other lines open.
Yeah, I just saw someone comment that I'm not hearing anything on our side at all from you, Lucky. You sound good on our side. So is anybody else hearing like Lucky as like muffled or background noise or anything? Summer was saying there's some feedback coming from his side.
Could it be my dog eating in the background?
No, it's coming from Lucky's side. Christy says you sound good. Yeah, there's a couple people saying you sound fine on their end as well, Lucky, so I'm not sure.
Well, some people, if you are having issues with the volume, what we tend to see work well is step out of the live for a minute and then come back in. And typically that can help rectify. I've had to do that a few times myself, especially on the cell phone.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. We're getting mixed feedback, so.
Well, Lucky, I think we'll dig into a few more questions, and then we'll share a few more thoughts, and then maybe we'll call it a night at a decent hour here. I don't want to overwork you, but I know. Do you have plans for a members only live this week as well with the community? Or
Yep, absolutely. Yep. We do members only live every Wednesday at 7 Mountain Time, and we do it every Wednesday evening. And we talk, it's such a cool group of people. We have such a cool members only live group that it's just a lot of fun. You know, I always make a thumbnail and I always put in a subject of what we're going to talk about, because I have an idea about what we're going to talk about. But one thing that I do in my members only lives is I kind of just turn the platform over to my members and I let them ask the questions and I let them kind of direct the conversation. So we'll be talking about the Idaho 4, but I kind of let my members just kind of pick and choose what we're going to talk about. And it always starts out, you know, on subject. And then usually we go off on a 3-hour tangent. You know, we could be talking about the Idaho 4 one minute and the next minute we're talking about Jeep Wranglers. So, you know, it really depends, but it's such a neat group of people, very open-minded, very accepting of everyone. You know, if you believe that Brian Koberger is guilty, if you believe that he's not guilty, it doesn't matter. You know, we're there to discuss everything in a very, very respectful way. And it's just a really great group. I love it. We do it every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock Mountain Time.
So definitely for those of you out there, if you haven't had the opportunity or haven't thought about it, please maybe just give it a shot. Jump on over to Unfiltered Lucky and hop in there as a member. And even if you can't, which we all understand, Lucky, we all get that not everybody can afford memberships or
Absolutely.
You know, I even have some people, and I completely understand it. They don't believe that they should support one, you know, like they shouldn't become a member of mine when there's somebody out there that the recognition and the views. And I absolutely agree. Just for those of you that are interested, it's an option out there for you. But Lucky also does great content that he does to the public. Every one of his videos is public. So make sure you check out his channel and give him a view and a watch. I myself, Lucky, I do plan on trying to get back into some content here as quick as I can. I'm still battling some major situations behind the scenes. As you know, we talk about it all the time. For all of you that don't know, Lucky and I are very good friends behind the scenes. I rattle his brain and his ears all the time, just dumping all my problems on him as much as I can.
It's not as bad. It's not as bad as you're making it sound.
He's been a great support, as so many in the community have been. So I'm going to be trying to do some more content. I'm going to try to dive back into it, do some more lives. I've got plans. I've got things I want to talk about and I want to share. So definitely look out for that. Don't forget as well, just real quick, the wife Jen has, oh God almighty, my Harry Potter skills. All right, let's see if it works the other way. My wife Jen has an amazing dog channel. For those of you that don't know, we have 3 amazing little ones.
To do a raffle for that.
And she wants to do a raffle for that. I have no idea what you're talking about. She did not give me the heads up on this at all.
Well, I wasn't going to do it for now.
Oh, she wasn't going to do it right now. As she knocks over the computer, don't worry. We're live, honey. It doesn't matter. But for all of you that would love to see dogs in action on the Vegas Strip, hop on over to Pitties Go Stripping.
So if anybody in the chat is a dog lover, we have a channel for our 3 dogs. It's called Pitties Go Stripping, and I made this little tumbler that has Pitties Go Stripping with all the dogs on it, and I wanted to do like a little raffle. If anybody went over to the channel, liked the channel, left a comment that you saw it in this live, then I would enter your names into a drawing to win this cup.
So why don't you drop the link for the channel so that people could go to the channel if they choose to. And just for all of you guys know, we do have funny like t-shirts for the dogs and things of that nature as well. I mean, what is the one that I liked? What was it, Lucky? It's like
Pitties. Show me your pitties.
Show me your pitties. Yeah, I think it's always fabulous to wear stuff like that and get in trouble.
The rules for that one is if you're not in the U.S., then you may have to pay part of the shipping because the shipping is expensive from out there. So if you want to still enter and you're outside the U.S., just make sure you're okay with paying part of the shipping.
See how we get so far off from the Idaho 4, Lucky? Anytime you and I come together, we have this conversation going. We get so far off of the actual case, but
you know what though? That's what I enjoy. That's why I enjoy our lives, is because, you know, really we talk about the case, we talk about our, you know, our points and what we think and our opinions and stuff like that. But it's really just a good conversation among friends. And I think that's, to me, that's my favorite part about doing these lives. You know, I only do public lives with you guys. So the only other lives that I do are members only lives. And I do them because I just enjoy it so much. I enjoy, you know, talking with you guys, and obviously we're good friends. So we're very comfortable. And a lot of these names that I see go by on the chat are all people that have been with us for quite a while. You know, we have a lot of the same subscribers. We have a lot, I hate that word so much, but we have a lot of the same, you know, people who watch our content. And oh, thanks, Lola. And I also, you know, it's just always a good time. It's just, you know, sitting around talking about true crime, no drama, you know, and that's what I enjoy.
Yeah. So I did drop both channels, the link to the dog channel. So if you're already subscribed, just comment that you saw it in this live so I can enter you into the drawing. But if you're not subscribed, subscribe and then leave a comment, and then I'll enter you into the drawing for the cup.
I think that's one thing, Lucky. I gotta join forces with you. This is what we are as real everyday people. We sit just like this. We talk. You know, we converse about silly things, funny things, sad things, family emergencies. we talk about true crime, but we just do it just like this. We have a good time. We're very supportive. And the one thing about our community, and like you, I can't see who's in the chat tonight, and I apologize because I want to give recognition to so many. I can't see, but I know the familiar names that mean so much, and they're not subscribers. These are not channel members. These are literally friends and family members, and that's what makes it so special. Is we built bonds and connections, and I literally, with my time away from the platform, I've realized I miss a lot of these people that I get into great conversations with,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
something that kind of holds me accountable to wanting to come back to do things like this. I just, right now it's difficult, Lucky. Like I want to do more. I'm just, it's not only just a health thing; it's a confidence thing. I'm a little deflated confidence wise, but as you know, I'm also working on a second channel that's sports related. It's something that's a passion of mine. It's something that I really just have a lot of interest in, which is sports, talking sports, playing games. Like we have the sports games airing and playing, and so that's something that I want to put a little effort into as well outside of true crime.
Yeah.
So I mean, if anybody's a sports fan, I'd love a little bit of support into that channel as well. But why don't we get into a couple more questions, and then
I wanted to respond to Beth real quick. Beth said I could talk primitive camping with Lucky, but he's probably got an Airstream. And I want to let you know I do not have an Airstream. I just slept in a hammock for 3 days in the mountains. So I'm very into primitive camping, Beth. So I would love to talk about that with you. I love to talk about camping. Definitely an outdoors person.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that super chat. She said, you guys all do a great job. Thank you, all of you.
definitely appreciate that. Thank you very much. And that's one thing I gotta say about Lucky is he'll answer the phone no matter what part of the country he's in. He could be up in a hammock in a tree, and I call him to bitch and moan about life, and he's just up there and enjoying the great outdoors, talking to me in the middle of nowhere. So I mean, I
I
give it
love
to
it.
you, Lucky. It's always great to hear about your little adventures, though, and just how down to earth of a person you're. Real. You're just very, very real, and I appreciate that so much. That this isn't just your face coming onto a platform to be, something like a name of a channel. You're who you are, no matter where you're at, and
Yeah.
that's it's a blessing to have you as a friend. It
Well,
truly
I mean,
is.
that's like I said, that's what I love about the friendship that we have, and we're able to talk about these things. We're able to, I mean, we're able to disagree about things that we talk about. We're able to, but at the end of the day, we're good friends, and we're adults. It doesn't, you know, I've always said that I would never let one case define my friendship with anybody. And I think a lot of times this case, the Idaho 4, in my opinion, it's gotten a little touchy at times because there are two sides, and it's so split. There's your guilters and you've got your pro burgers, and it's really a shame because really both sides could join forces and just talk about true crime, which is what I'm on this platform to do. I'm not on this platform to argue with another side or whose side's better. I'm not. I'm here to talk about true crime, and I know that you're here for that same thing.
Yeah, that's what makes it much more enjoyable and less stressful is just to be able to talk and discuss things. And there are so many people out there that have better information than me. They have more knowledge than I do.
Of
They
course.
they have, great points, great thoughts, and I love to hear all of that. And I just think it's really sad when there's such a divisional line that creates arguments to where I'll go to another channel just to listen, and I get turned off really badly when they start calling other people names or disrespecting people or saying just such negativity. And I'm thinking to myself, aren't we all here to talk about true crime? We're talking cases. I mean, we could discuss evidence and thoughts and feelings, and we don't have to hate each other while doing so. And I think that's one thing that, I've realized is I've taken a step away for the moment from the platform to try to just gather myself, not only, outside body wise, but also inside, mentally, emotionally, because you can get stirred in some crazy ways, and it's good to reel it back in. I do want to make a mention real quick, is he's a good friend of both of ours as well. Pete with Murder Metal Mayhem. Everybody, I know you guys are big fans and you've been very supportive of him. Just know, again, this month he goes in for an eye surgery as well. So keep him in your thoughts and in your prayers, just to make sure it's successful. It is, something that's not really too bad. It's a cataract, which I had done in one eye, but let me tell you, it's still painful. Mistakes do happen, so let's keep him in our thoughts and let's wish him the best on that. So if you get the opportunity, stop by Pete's channel, give him a big thumbs up, leave him a comment that Lucky and I are sending him best wishes along with you, and let him feel some love as well, because he is a great friend to us as well. So I got to use my Houdini, Harry Potter. I got to change the camera again, but we would much appreciate it if you would do that. And any of you in the chat and in the community that are enduring anything going on, because I know you all have real lives. You guys endure as well. We are always thinking about all of you. I know Lucky has an open door policy when it comes to emails. I do as well. We are always here for you. We always want to, discuss things and be on your side. So never hesitate. For me, it may take an extra minute to get back to you because I can't read and the wife has to read it for me. But I know, Lucky, you got that open door too, and you're very open and very caring as well. So
I love to. That's one of the things that I love the most. I love to be in contact with everybody, and I have such an appreciation for everyone who supports my channel, who supports your channel and Jen's channel, and I just have such a genuine, appreciation for that. It means a lot to me, and I think that a lot of people don't realize that when you start a YouTube channel, you don't think that it's going to grow into what our channels have grown into. You really don't. And I think that for me, I'm just so grateful for everybody who supports my channel, and everybody all of my members who I think the world of them, and everybody who supports my channel. Every single one of you. And I have an open, you can always contact me through email, unfilteredlucky1@gmail.com. And I just have such an appreciation for you all, and I'm gonna definitely be bringing out more content. I took a little bit of time away to research a few other cases that I'm looking into that we're going to start talking about on my channel. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it's always a great live.
Yeah, we always enjoy it, and just so that people can kind of understand where I'm going to be, June 18th, I meet with the new surgeon. I don't know when he's going to schedule the very necessary. I have still dealing with a retinal detachment in the right eye, with major other issues as well. Been waiting on surgery on the right eye, and hopefully we get in as quick as we can. And from what I understand, with the shape of the eye, I'm going to be down months. It's going to be a while before I'm moving.
Yeah, they've actually been saying that it might be easier just to remove the eye.
They have spoken with me and opened the door to me to think about just going ahead and removing my right eye, which I think I'm good with. Lucky, I'm like, let's go ahead and take that baby out and we'll just be done with it. Jen doesn't like the idea of me bouncing around with glass eyes, so we'll just kind of see on the 18th where we're at with that. But why don't we dive in just to a couple more questions, and then we'll head it off for the night. Does that sound fair to you?
Absolutely.
All right, let's see if I can find some of these questions that I had marked a while back. Let's see.
There's like 9 million questions, and she's being picky.
Well, I'm just trying to... Okay. Does anyone think the 8 hours found in his apartment are connected to this? Or the eight hairs found in his apartment are connected to this?
I think
What do you
if they
think?
were, we would know about it.
Yeah, I think that that evidence was collected very early, and Ann Taylor stood up in the court and also motioned to the court that nothing connected her client, Brian Koberger, to the victims or the home. And I think if they had found 8 hairs in his apartment, that would have been a very difficult motion to file to the court or argument to be had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
K-Dub says, riddle me this. If BK is innocent, why or what put him on the map of LE? Why they only consider him? Pullman PD helped Moscow with his name. He applied to work there and was turned down. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a really good question. I'm still confused a little bit about how they came up with Brian Koberger. I'm still in the same boat with Ann Taylor as to what led them to Brian Koberger, because I still have a hard time believing that Washington State University police just plucked him out of the population and decided to focus on him. I mean, the guy drives a white 4-door Hyundai and he's over 5'10" with bushy eyebrows. It just seems like that would be pretty common, in any area. So I'm still kind of confused about what exactly led law enforcement to Brian Koberger.
Well, it's interesting why they're only considering him as well. Like, why isn't there any other suspects?
Right, especially since there was other DNA in the house.
I just kind of say, in my answer to this question, it's going to be very interesting when we get to trial of what comes out of what tips came through on the tip line. I want to know who, when, why pointed at Brian Koberger before they actually got back the information in regards to the IGG and things of that nature. I have a gut feeling his name was spoken by at least somebody, if not somebodies, and I'm just interested to see what those tips could literally say or what they claimed. That to me.
Right. I wanted to tell official real quick. I was thinking about you the other day, and I was curious, how is your brother? I sorry, I just kind of cut in on that. But yeah, I agree. I think that the feds, I still think that I'm still curious if we're going to find out whether or not, if it's going to be confirmed that the feds were watching Brian Koberger before he moved to Pullman, Washington.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I agree with you. I would like to know if he happened to be on the map for potentially something else, and he just kind of fell into the view of an investigation of this case because of something else. And I don't point fingers or accuse of anything, but Dateline did release information of potential searches he was making on his accounts that could potentially be sexually explicit issues in regards to searches. I'm not talking about like the Bundy. I'm not talking about those. The sexually explicit negative searches that were portrayed, if that is true, that can land you on an investigative spectrum of the feds, of people looking at those types of websites and those types of things. Could his name have been entangled somewhere else and it just got wrapped into this somehow? Could there be a connection to OnlyFans? I mean, I hate to bring that in because I know people have talked about it in the past. Like, did Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, Ashlyn Couch, any of these young ladies have an OnlyFans account that could lead to some sort of connection?
Right. Well, and think about this, because Brian Koberger, he did a Zoom interview with Pullman Police Department in April. So that means that would have been before he even graduated from DeSales That was when he still lived in Pennsylvania. So is it possible maybe that they were looking into his background back in April when he applied with Pullman?
Now, I also wonder if maybe he was on the spectrum of investigation for the young lady that overdosed and lost her life. And I'm not saying like they're investigating him as if he took that young lady's life in a gruesome way, like a knifing. But I mean, people do get investigated for helping with the narcotics or things of that nature that could have led to that young lady's loss of life. So I'm staying very open-minded that there is potentially a different investigation that could have been going on, and that would also lead to a lot of these sealings and redactings, because those cases have not been formally charged or filed against him. So that would still be private information and possibly private investigative information that they don't want out there. But Brian Koberger's team knows about it, and who knows? Who knows from there, you know? But
Yeah,
that's a great question.
Maybe his posts, maybe, who knows, you know, but that's a really good question.
Citrus wanted to know how the FBI got there so quickly as well. I didn't mark her question, but that's what it was. What are you guys' thoughts on that? How they got on site so fast?
Weren't they already in the area? They were already working on something, right, Lucky? I mean, that's what I know.
Yeah, I believe they were already working. I believe they were already in the area, but that's why I was asking the question about, you know, I wonder if they'll ever confirm, or if we'll ever find out for sure whether Brian Koberger was being monitored before he even moved from Pennsylvania.
Well, somebody had told me they were in town. This may be true or might not be, investigating narcotics. Like they were on a case for narcotics.
Right.
That they were doing an investigation of. And I mean, I don't know if that had anything to do with them jumping in right away, but I guarantee you the phone call was made very quickly by Moscow Police Department to the Idaho State Police. The Idaho State Police made the phone call immediately to the FBI saying, you guys better all be here. This is massive. This is well above our heads. We're not going to be able to figure this out. We need help. And I think they were gladly on the scene. Because if this was potentially a serial killer type deal, that's national. That's federal, on a federal scale. So they would be involved anyway. So,
and we do know that they did look into the Travis and Jamelin Jutin case. And they also looked into the Cheryl Ladd case as well, because both of those cases happened within a 2.5-year period right before the Idaho 4 case. And they were both basically the same situation. You know, somebody went into these people's house while they were sleeping and attacked them with a knife. So it wouldn't surprise me if they at least were turning over those stones, you know?
Could you maybe tie that to the alternative perp of this case, maybe? Could Ann Taylor go a direction of trying to prove that one of those cases is linked to this?
I don't think they could with the Jutin case, because it's so, the Travis and Jamelin Jutin conclusion was so crazy, because, you know, this went on for 3 years. And of course, Jamelin survived the attack and Travis lost his life. And this went on for 3 years. And they had no suspects, no persons of interest. They were telling the families, we have no idea. The case has gone cold. And then 3 years later, the families and Jamelin both find out that the suspect, whose DNA was all over the house, his car was parked in front of the house at the time of the crimes, had taken his own life a week and a half after those crimes. So law enforcement had a suspect. They had a prime suspect whose DNA was at the crime scene and his vehicle was at the crime scene. And they never told the families or Jamelin Jutin about this suspect. So how crazy is that these people are walking around for 3 years wondering if this person's out there? I mean, Jamelin almost was killed, you know? So Jamelin's walking around out there wondering if this guy who attacked her is going to come back for her, when meanwhile This guy's been deceased for 3 years. It's crazy. That's a crazy case.
It sounds like a crazy case. Wow. Oh, I guess I'll just show that one since I just showed it. Ruby said, Air, what you said about potential other prior open investigations not being able to be disclosed makes a lot of sense. Hadn't considered that before.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, if there's other cases out there that are being investigated and they're looking into Brian Koberger, they're not going to throw Brian Koberger's names into the mix because they don't want to, one, impede the investigation they're doing into those other cases. But two, if Brian Koberger is potentially on the spectrum as the person of interest in those cases, they're going to keep that quiet until they get enough evidence and then just whamboodle it. They'll show up at his jail cell and arrest him on those charges as well. That way, they can't prepare and do all of that because so much goes into that. I've seen that happen so many times. I've been lucky. I've been the suspect in like 5 cases at one time. They arrest me on one, and they continue the investigation on the others. They're just not telling me I'm the suspect in that until either, they deem me as not the suspect anymore or they arrest me. So it would be interesting to see, but that would be also another reason why so many things are sealed. He hasn't been charged with it, so those things would have to be sealed. Otherwise, it could really bring guilt to his self in this case. And look, I'm getting help here, Lucky.
Xander's decided he is joining the chat, whether we want him to or not.
He just doesn't realize he's impeding my magical wand for the camera.
He's going to help you guys sign off.
Yeah, this is called love. Yeah.
Texas Ranger said, Air sounds like they have the knife, possibly.
I disagree. I don't think they have the knife. They're utilizing a demonstrative weapon within the case for the trial, and that's what the motions to the court were for them to be able to present a knife, a K-bar in a glass case. That they don't have the weapon. They've stated this very clearly. I think throughout the entirety of this investigation, they didn't have the weapon.
I think they might have. I think it's just going to be a replica.
Yeah. They have to demonstrate it at trial. They have to show what it is. So, I mean, they're going to put it in the glass case for all to see. It's going to be the same thing as the model house. I mean, they're going to wheel this model 1122 King Road home in on a table for all to see.
It's not going to be to scale.
It's not going to be to scale, but, same thing. It's demonstrative. It's for the jury to see.
Yeah.
2 more questions and we'll call it good, Lucky.
All right.
I'm wearing out.
I could do this all night.
Beth had a question. How are none of the students, residents, or anyone in Moscow spilling anything? We know that young people love their social media.
I agree. I've been saying that's from the very beginning, is that it's pretty crazy how they've managed to keep a lot of this in the shadows and stuff like that. But there are people who are talking. I know AR hears a lot. We hear a lot of things in the background from people. And so there are some people who are talking. But I agree. I thought that from the very beginning. It's kind of strange that nobody in this town is, coming out on their social networks, because there's people out there that know stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be interesting to see the witness list of. I think we're going to see a lot of college kids that we would expect to be the talkers are on that witness list. They've all been underneath the gag order and probably warned to be very careful in regards to violating that gag order. Now, the town itself, that's a whole other story, but I think those that can spread rumors have. I think those that could leak information have. Hence why we see books being written, we see documentary shows. So I think people are speaking more than what we truly think they are. But at the end of the day, not as many probably as what we expect to be, but we'll see. We'll see what comes out as the trial either starts or ends. How many people come out and spill what they knew and what they thought.
Mm-hmm. All right, last question from Karen. Do you think the judge is aware of how weak is the case and how biased is the public? I mean, really not his judge talk.
Do you think the judge is aware of how weak is the case and how biased is the public? I would think that he understands. I mean, I would say that Judge Hippler. Well, I don't know about how weak is the case, but I think that he understands about the public, and if the public is following the mainstream media, then obviously they're going to be leaning toward in the direction that Bryan Kohberger is guilty. Everybody that I ever talked to about this case who has only followed it on mainstream media, they all believe that Bryan Kohberger is guilty. Because that's what mainstream media is portraying.
The one thing that I'll kind of say about Judge Hippler is it's not his job to determine whether a prosecution's case is weak or whether or not it's strong. The judge is there to rule upon the actual motions to the court, the arguments presented on evidence and various things. He's not there to determine whether the case is weak or strong. That was already done by the grand jury who indicted Bryan Kohberger. They felt as though the state had enough evidence to indict Bryan Kohberger and bind him over to the courts to proceed to trial to find out whether the said evidence would find him guilty or innocent in a jury's eyes. Judge Hippler is only there to rule upon motions and arguments. So there's nothing that this judge could potentially do outside of ruling on those. Now, his major rulings that could take precedence would be if someone like Ann Taylor motioned to the courts for a dismissal. He would have to hear that argument and then make his determination based upon the facts presented of that argument. But Judge Hippler cannot step in. I wish people would understand this. Without any motions or arguments to the court by the lawyers, Judge Hippler can't step in and drop charges against Bryan Kohberger. He cannot stop in and make a ruling and say, hey, by the way, the evidence is weak. I'm going to throw this case out. It has to be motioned through the actual arguments to the court. And Ann Taylor has not asked Hippler to throw this case out. Have you noticed that, Lucky? Ann Taylor has not stepped up to Judge Hippler and said, I want you to dismiss this case because of bam. Here's the reason. She hadn't done that with him.
Right.
She did it with Judge Judge. She has not done it with Hippler. So Hippler's whole main thing right now is to ensure this case gets to trial, does it in a manner that allows for both sides to have the necessary means to argue their case at trial. So he's getting everything set at this point to do that. I'm sure you agree, Lucky. This case is not leaving this court system. It's going to trial. I mean, whether it's this year, next year, whatever it might be, it's going to trial.
I agree.
And Hippler's not the determining factor of innocence or guilt. We need to weigh out that that's going to be the jury of common people like you or I that's going to make that decision on Bryan Kohberger's innocence or guilt. So it's going to be who brings the best arguments to that trials court and who puts on a good show, who's got a good story to tell that's believable. And hopefully at this point, Lucky, we all get to watch it. Hopefully it doesn't get shut down, put into the dark because of the leaks and the stupidity that's happening outside of the courtroom. We need this to stay in the courtroom and happen in the courtroom, not outside of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just talked forever.
I agree.
No, I was just thinking I want to see it, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I just hope to have good enough vision to see it when it comes back. Otherwise, I'm listening some more.
All right. Did you guys want to answer any more, or you think we're going to wrap it up this time and start again at another time?
I think we
I,
called
I'm,
it.
I'm sure we're gonna do many more of these.
Yes, I'm sure we'll do that.
I don't know. I think I'm done. That's it.
You
I'm
done?
done. I can't do this no more.
So we'll save the remaining questions for the next live then, if you guys want to.
It's no longer a convict's thoughts. It's now a convict's quits.
Oh my god. Convicts is blind. Can't see anymore.
I'm going to part ways first. I'm going to say my thank yous to everybody that's joined us. It's always a pleasure to have you in the chat. I'm going to shut my mouth. I said you all love. I hope everybody's doing well. You guys have a great night. I'm going to hand it over to them and mute myself.
I'm going to do one last thing. So if anybody wants to enter the raffle for the Pity's Ghost Stripping Tumblr, go to the Pity's Ghost Stripping channel, leave a comment, and I will enter you into the drawing. I will send it free within the U.S., outside the U.S. You got to help me out on the shipping. And I'll leave the links one more time. All right, Lucky, all you.
I just want to say thank you to everybody who was in the chat, everybody who was following along, even if you're not in the chat. Without you guys, none of this is possible. Without every single person on this chat, none of this is possible. So I appreciate you guys so much. I'm very grateful for all of the support. Like I said, we do a members only live every Wednesday night at 7:00. So if that's something you're interested in, then, maybe give that a try. To all the members of Unfiltered Lucky, my unfiltered fam, we will see you on Wednesday at 7. And just thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Like I said, without you guys, none of this is possible.
100%.
Yep, definitely appreciate it. And keep up the support. Keep up the love of each other. Let's always stay the top of the line, the most respectful, the ones that carry ourselves with integrity. Let's just keep an on in this community and show everybody what it's all about. We definitely thank you to everybody that supports Unfiltered Lucky, myself, my wife Jennifer, Pete with Unfiltered Lucky, Pete with Murder Metal Mayhem, and others out there alike, as we've had many creators within our community chat tonight. We thank each and every single one of you, and you guys all have a great night.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.